Hi everybody, it's Kevin at Bear Creek. It's Monday, December 23rd, 2019. Been nice out actually the last few days. The bees have been out getting a little bit of cleansing flights. I've even seen some, looks like they're out scouting for water more than anything. So that's been cool kind of to see them out and about. But still continuing my winter projects, as it were. One of the things that I have decided that I am going to do, many of you know that earlier this year I sort of converted all of my hives from 10 frames down to 8 frames with a frame feeder in it, gallon-and-a-half frame feeder, which takes up 2 slots. And that actually works really well to a certain point for me. The point being that when it gets colder, when the bees sit in a cluster on colder nights, they don't like to move off of that cluster to go and climb in and go after the syrup and draw it down. Where if they had it directly above their cluster, they wouldn't have to move out of the cluster to take down syrup and then store it in the comb as they need it. So I want to be as versatile as possible without being overly cumbersome. And also what I did this summer is I went and bought and made up a bunch of migratory covers. The benefits of the migratory cover are that you're able to slide the hives together a little bit easier for warmth in the winter, plus for transport versus the telescoping cover hive. And I'll show you, this is a telescoping cover hive right here, standard looking one. What it is you know, it's got 4 sides to it that slide on over your hive, and you're able to actually, because it's built a little bit longer than the hive, you're able to move it in and out a little bit. And a lot of people don't quite realize this for a telescoping cover, but that's a benefit to you if you have a inner cover, a slotted inner cover with a vent hole. You can actually regulate the amount of venting that goes. If you don't want any robbing, you can slide this all the way backwards and close up that vent hole, or you can slide it all the way forward on hot days and get more airflow through your hive. So there is a benefit to this. The downside of this, because it's got the aluminum cover on it, we can't feed directly on top of the hive. So any kind of feeding is going to have to require, at least it's going to have to either require a frame feeder or some sort of a box placed on over your hive, and then a pail put on, and then the lid put on over that, which you can do if you got the equipment, and that's great. Boxes are kind of a premium cost, so I'm trying to sort of go down on that, but I see benefit to both type of hive covers. The migratory cover only has a lip on the front and the back. It has no lip on the sides, and that's so that you can slide the hives closer together during transport and in the wintertime, share heat, like I said. The downside to this is that they are built to fit rather snugly on top. Instead of a flat board being placed on top like a lot of commercial beekeepers, this actually kind of keeps it from being blown off, so it can't be blown off. But the downside to it is that it will cover that vent hole if you have a wooden inner cover. And honestly, in the wintertime, up here, at least in Wisconsin, for my beekeeping, I don't necessarily see the need for an upper vent in the summertime. The wintertime, I do, but not in the summertime. In the wintertime, I have a 2-inch piece of foam on here, along with the Reflectix, so it sits up a bit. So actually, and then I have my hole drilled here for an inner cover, but I also have a another rim put on for mountain camp, which has a vent hole. So this won't cover it up because of that 2 inches of foam insulation. But I've had a lot of questions on some of my nukes with these things. These are called feeder plugs or cap plugs, and these plug up feeder holes in my nucleus colonies. Well, because I've got these migratory covers, which are wood, I have decided that for versatility's sake, I'm going to be putting feeder holes in these larger hives, in this larger hive top, to assist me in feeding when it's very, very cold out, like in the very, very early spring if they need it, or very, very late fall. I noticed one of my hives this late fall, and this kind of, I noticed this in a couple years in a row, but especially this year, I had a full hive that died of starvation that I just checked on last week, or this week actually. Loaded with bees, completely full healthy hive without a drop of honey in it. Downside being, right next to it was 1.5 gallons of syrup. They hadn't touched it, because when I put it in the end of October, like around the 19th of October, and there wasn't enough cold, warm days for them to break cluster and go after it and go get it. If they had feed directly over the top of them, they would have been able to take feed down at least 1 gallon pails worth that I put on before I left, because I left for about a month. I went on a hunting trip, but they would have been able to at least take that gallon down, and that would have gotten them at least well into December before I put my mountain camp on. So they would have been saved, probably. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to install cap feeder hole in these migratory covers really, really quick. You can buy these at Man Lake, and I'll actually show the product description right here on their website. They're 24 cents a piece. I don't know if they have a bulk price. I mean, I look right here, and this is a sealed container, and I don't know, there's probably about 20, 25 in there. I always keep a lot extra on hand, and I'll tell you why. When I pull this cap off, and I set it aside, and I put, whether it's my nuke, and I put a feeder jar on, or a pail, I'm always wondering what to do with this thing. And I usually just set it on top of the hive, and on occasion, the wind gets a hold of it, blows it off, lands in the deep grass, and I never find them again. So I always try to keep a bunch of these handy, so as replacements, because I lose them. Also, when they drop on the ground and my dog finds them, and they are a nice little chew toy for him, apparently. But they are 1.5 inches in diameter. Now, what you're going to want and what you're going to need is an 1.5 inch diameter hole saw, is what they call this. And of course, some type of drill. Now, occasionally these get worn down and you can't figure out if that's quite 1.5 inches or not, or it's close, and you take out your ruler and you measure it, and you're still wondering, is that 1.5 inches, or is that 1.25 inches, or 1 3/8 hole saw? Well, because your hive tops cost about 16 bucks a piece, not including your painting job that you did on them, I highly recommend getting a piece of scrap, setting it down, and doing a test hole first. That is the first order of business, just to make sure that you have the right, you're using the right hole saw. And then I just grab my scrap piece of wood. Well, let's get this a little closer here. Okay. Now, if you don't want to get a blowout on one side where all the shards come out, drill it down to a point where your pilot drill bit comes out the other side. Flip your piece of material over, because you'll see it. You'll actually see the pilot hole that came through. This is the side you were drilling on. Your pilot hole came through. You flip it over and drill your hole, and then you'll have a nice clean hole. And then take your feeder plug and see if that's the size that you want. Now, it goes in pretty loose, but it's tapered, and it gets tighter as it gets up to the top. And that is a perfect fit right there. So that's the one I want. And what this does is, actually, when it rains, it'll keep water from going down into your feeder holes when you're not using the feeder holes. So, okay, the second order of business is that you want to make sure that you center this over a brood nest, or where you think the brood nest is going to be on your hives. Now, for most people, if you don't have the frame feeders inside, your frame feeder is exactly in the middle. This is a 16 1/4 inch wide piece of material here. So your center would be roughly 8 1/8 inches over from the side. And then it's, well, it's 19 7/8 plus 3/4 plus 3/4. Let's see, that's 20 7/8, 21 7/8, 21 5/8, roughly 21 3/8, roughly. So 21 3/8, so you can say, okay, 21 3/8, so that's 10 1/2 inches from the outside edge to the center. That's a rough estimate, so you can put your mark at 10 1/2 inches and 8 1/8 inches, and that's pretty well your center. However, I have frame feeders on mine, and my frame feeder takes up 2 frame spaces. So my brood nest center is going to be skewed a bit from dead center. So in my case, I want to put my hole roughly 2 frames to the right, or 2 frames over from. So what we have here is a frame feeder and 8 frames. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Frame feeder takes up 2. So what I've got to do is center it from the first frame over to the end over here. So I am roughly at 12 1/2 inches. So I want to get it about 6 1/4 inches, which would be about right here. That would be the center of my brood nest for this box. The length, it remains the same, so about 10 and a half inches, 10 and 5/8 inches, somewhere around there for my center. And that's going to be my center now. Now, because this top is reversible, whichever way I'm centered over, that's the way I want to put it on my hive. So if my frame feeder is over on this side, you know, I can put it on this way. And if my frame feeder is over on this side, well, I just turn it around and I put it over on this side. So that's what I'm going to do. So, okay. What I'm going to do is go roughly 10 and 5/8 is what I'm going to shoot for. And it looks like I'm going to put my hole right in the middle of my bear here, which is a shame. And then I want to go 6 1/4 from this end on line with that. Okay. Now I just want to double check. Let's see what we got here. 16 and a half. Yep. That's roughly 8 1/4, so that's about right. Okay. And then I got 6 1/4, so I'm right there. So what we're going to do, and unfortunately this, I've got no choice behind this. These are made from 3 tongue and groove boards, and that comes from the factory like that, already made. And unfortunately where I'm drilling is actually right in the tongue seam, but I'm going to go ahead and do this anyways right here. Okay, now you want to check it and look for your pilot hole, and right there is my pilot hole coming through. So I'm flipping it over. The good news is, because of these lips, I don't have to set this on anything to get it up, so I'm not drilling a hole into my table. Just be mindful of what you're drilling it on. Okay. So there we go. There's our hole. Hopefully you can see that. And then right there. And then all we do is take our feeder plug. Boom, done. And we have our feeder plug. And one thing I'll warn you about with this, do not rock this and try to get it as straight in as possible, because you want these feeder plugs to be in as tight as possible in there. They should, this wood, as it weathers a little bit, it should swell a little bit, and these feeder plugs and make it a little tighter, because this one is just, it's in there okay, but you know, like I said, with this sitting on the hive, the wood will get a little wet, and it will swell the wood just ever so slightly, enough to really make these nice and snug in there. But this is snug enough where it won't let any water in. But anyways, that's all there is to it. that's that. And that's that. If you got any questions, feel free to leave me a comment below. And if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, I hope you subscribe. Sorry about that. I see I wasn't in the shot. Till next time, happy beekeeping. Skol Vikings.